Hi everyone, welcome to my highlights and review of the Avatar PD708. This is a drum sampling pad which has many uses. You can use it as a drum set if you set it up properly. You can use it as just a general looping instrument where you can put loops on each of the pads. You can turn them on, turn them off whenever you need to. You can also just trigger sounds along with a whatever drum set or whatever you're playing. Even if you're playing the keyboards and you just want to trigger a particular sound, you can put them all on here. You have full capability of loading in your samples or creating your own samples with this device, and we're going to go over all of those aspects. We're going to start with the whole physical makeup of this instrument, and then we're going to get down into the inputs, outputs, and then we're going to get into the menu. Hi, Ron from the future. I just wanted to let you know that during this video, when I was making it, I said several times that I wanted to add the sounds and the samples and play them for you and add it to this video. But now in post-processing, I'm realizing how long this video ended up being. A lot longer than I anticipated. So I'm deciding to do a separate video for the sounds. I will link it at the very end of this video, so you'll be able to go to the end of this video whenever you want, and then you can click on the link to the sound video. I basically go through a ton of their preset sets and play through a lot of those things randomly. So there's some really good playing and then there's some not so good playing. So now let's go back in time to the video. We're going to start with the physical aspects of it first. The plastic is really solid. It is not flimsy. It is not cheesy. It's not cheap. They did a really good job of giving it a good solid frame. Now, I wouldn't suggest putting this, loosely in a vehicle or any kind of touring vehicle. If you're touring or anything like that, definitely get some kind of case and protection for it. I wouldn't just leave that plastic to chance, but it is pretty solidly made. So as long as you have some kind of case for it, no matter what, I think you're in pretty safe conditions. As you can see, there are 9 pads. There are also 9 correlating LED lights. Those lights, you can change those colors, which is really cool. There's a reason for these LED lights. We're going to discuss them in a few minutes, but let's talk about the pads. First of all, the pads feel really, really, really nice. These are not like really stiff, hard, harsh pads where you feel like you're hitting a block of wood or anything like that. These have a very nice feel to them. And I was very impressed with that. And even the shoulder, I call these little shoulders. I don't know what they're technically called. I call them little shoulder pads. Okay, so these shoulder pads also act the same as these 6 full-size pads below. These are about 4x4. Each one of these pads, and you can still, they have the same flexibility, the same possibilities with all of the adjustments, and we're going to talk about that in a few seconds. So now that we've gone over the physical, underneath has a little place for you to mount the stand to it. The stand is an extra $50 or $60. I think that the stand is a really, really great purchase for this. Really helps out getting it the exact height and angle that you want to play and makes it a lot more comfortable. All right, let's go over the ins and outputs. Okay, so starting over in this direction, we've got our basic line outputs. And those line outputs can go to a PA system or to a monitoring system, whichever you want to do. They have stereo right and left. You can assign the sounds to go either right or left completely, or some variation of stereo in between. Or you can run it like what I'm doing right now. I'm running it pretty much mono, which is both in center. And then you have this other input. It's actually technically a 1/4 inch input. And then they give you a little adapter to use as an 1/8 inch input in case you want to make a sample. So that you can directly record right into the device and create your sample that way. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few seconds. It has a little master volume control for the input right here. It's a little gain level. And then as we get over here, actually here it is, there's the gain level. And then here we've got the USB. You've got a USB thumb drive or USB drive, I should just call it. And then you have a USB port that goes to Windows or a Mac computer. We're gonna talk about that in detail in a few minutes. But again, we're just going over the physics right now. There's a reason why I kind of looked at you funny. Did you notice I looked at you funny? Okay. Well, there's a reason why when I said that. Okay, we're moving on. So as you can see here, regular MIDI in and out right here, that's kind of common. You will find that in most instruments still even today, even though it's kind of getting, I won't say phased out because there's still a really great use for it. But MIDI features are just, it's kind of old school and it's just not utilizing the instrument the way that most instruments coming out now are. And then we have our inputs for our extra triggers and pads. So for example, I have a bass drum pedal and I have a hi-hat pedal. Now the bass drum pedal is actually triggering a sound. So what I did is I put it into trigger 1/2, which really means if it was a dual sensor trigger, or if I wanted to separate it and make it two triggers, I could actually do that and have it trigger through this device. And as you can see, there are 4 of those inputs that you can have. And again, they can be stereo to mono, or they can be just run the way I've done it, which is just a direct mono. So I have a V-Drums kick drum pad, electronic pad, right here. Okay, so basically I'm just running the 1/4 inch in mono out of this into that trigger. Okay, by the way, I'm going to be adding sound samples and play along here in a few minutes here. You're going to hear a lot of what the sounds are inside and some of the ones that I've made. All right, next we get down here to the 2 more inputs here. Those are foot control, or I'm sorry, those are actually control. Yeah, you could say foot control pedals. So you can either use it as a one where you can shift the programming from one kit to the next kit, or some variation. You have a lot of flexibility with that, or you can just program it as a hi-hat. And that's what I've done here. I have it right now currently hooked up to a V-Drum hi-hat pedal, and I use that to control my opening and closing the hi-hat. Sorry for a second. So what I do is I typically put the hi-hat over here in the bottom right, and then I'm able to open and close it. Again, gonna play all this stuff for you in a few minutes. And then if you notice up front here, we've got the menu system. We've got these 3 buttons. We're gonna go over all of that. And we've got this whole entire menu button, entire menu system, and then this round button as well. All right, I think that's it for the inputs, outputs, the pads themselves, and the hardware. Now let's get down to the menu and what's inside this. All right, let's take a look at the menu control features that we have here. There's a ton going on here. I'm going to just give you a brief overview first, and then we're going to go back and dig into things a little bit deeper. Over here, we have our trigger lights, and then we have our volume controls. We have our main LCD screen, and then we have what I'm calling like a menu. And then here is direction buttons to navigate the menu. And then we have our OK button, which is like an enter, and this is our return. And this knob absolutely turns the kit numbers or whatever. It turns your values very fast. You can turn it very fast, or you can do it by small increments of 1 at a time. All right, let's take a look at this more in depth. The trigger buttons are mainly for if you have added external triggers to the back of the device. There are 4 inputs. They would show up right here once it's triggered. And same with the foot pedal controller. So if you're plugging in a hi-hat and you play that hi-hat pedal, it will show up here. It'll light up right here. And same with number 2 or whatever. You can put them anywhere you want. You can adjust all of that. The effects are something if you need the effects on, or if you would rather keep them off for your front of house sound engineer to take care of for you, you would just turn this on and off. Here is your master volume for what you're sending out to the mains from the main outputs. And this is your headphone volumes. Your headphone outputs are right here. By the way, this little knob is the volume for the effects. So if you do want effects on your setup before you send it out to the house, you can adjust the amount right there. All sounds off is exactly as it seems. Once you play a loop, and if you want it to stop, you can just go ahead and do that. There's other ways of stopping a loop. You can set that up and you can change all those parameters yourself, but that's just a kind of a fail-safe. Oh, I don't remember what to do. Here we go. Boom. So now we've got our LCD screen, and then we have a lot of information on here. Top left is their kit number, your tempo number for this particular kit or this particular song. That's the title I gave it. And then you have these function buttons. These 3 function buttons work differently for whatever different menu button you're in. So if you're in the home button, it's going to be pad volume, kit effects, and tempo. And if you're in pad, that would be wave A, wave B, and mode. So wave A is the same thing as sampling, but we'll go a step at a time. So here then we've got, let me go into the tempo button. So function 3 in the home is the tempo button. And here you can tap in the tempo that you believe you should be playing. Okay, you can just go ahead and tap it in, and you can see I was right around 122. The beat here changes basically your time signature. It's where you want that accent to be. Do you want it every first beat, every third beat, every fifth beat, whatever it is, or most of the time it's 4/4. So it's mostly going to be an accent on every 4 beat. This is the volume control. The volume control right over here is for that particular click. Now, if you want to hear the click, you would press the tempo button over here. And you can also see that it clicks in time. So it's clicking at this tempo right now, and you can change that as need be. If you notice, the tempo is still 79 up here at the top. That means I've programmed that in. So whatever I change down here is just temporary. All right, let's go into pad down here. Pad will get you a different menu so you can adjust each individual pad or trigger. So let's say we're going to adjust this particular pad. If you notice, I hit that and it turned into pad 8. Pad 8 is S-Ways SD. So S-Ways is just this is a kit that I put together. So these are all my samples. And basically the snare drum sample, all these samples refer to a song called Separate Ways by Journey. That's all. And I use a regular snare drum on the first wave or wave A. You could call this sample A, or I mean, you could call it a lot of different things. They call it wave A. It doesn't, whatever. 6 1/2 dozen. Here, wave B over here. This is basically the same thing, snare drum with an R there. So that R represents for me a rim shot. And I'll explain all of that in a minute. I'm going to give you a little bit of a brief tutorial about how to set this up as a drum set and some key ideas that you can use in a few minutes. But that's our second sound. So each pad can have 2 sounds. You can layer them. And over here in mode, we'll tell you how they're layered. So for example, if you go down to where it says type, you can change how it's layered right here. You can have it where it switches from one to the other. You can have them where it's simultaneous, which means both at the same time. You can have just wave A, just wave B, and so on. There's even fade and mix. They're exactly as you might imagine them to be as far as the definition. So I'm going to use this little return or escape button to get out of that particular pad mode. We're going to go into kit set. Kit set, you have a lot of options. You have a lot of flexibility and customization that you could do. Kit volume, kit tempo, pad. And then you've got the lights here. For example, if you go into here, and this is kind of a neat thing that I like to do, you can change the color of the LEDs. You can change them to a lot of different colors. There's a bunch in here. And if you notice, if I go down to here where it says red, if that means when I strike the pad, it'll turn red while that sample is playing. Okay, once that sample is done, it'll go back to the regular color, whatever you set it to be. The output here is as you would imagine. You can have whichever pad, whichever effects, and whatever output you want. You can go in and adjust all of that. Then you can go into MIDI and you can control all the MIDI parameters as you see fit. We're going to escape out of that. We were in kit set to do all that. Now we're going to go into utility. Now utility is where you would input and export your samples. So if you have samples on a computer or desktop, whatever, laptop, and you want to put it into this device, you would get a you would get a thumb drive or a USB drive. You would get a USB drive and then you would format it in FAT32. Then what you would do is create a directory for it. They don't tell you this. You kind of just have to know how to do it. So it's a little bit misleading. You really do need to set it up properly. And I'll tell you what that setup is. The setup is very simple. If you have the root directory, you would create 3 folders. One would be a load folder, one would be a save folder, and one would be an update folder. When you have all 3 of those folders on the root directory, then when you go into their website and you download, let's say, samples or sound samples or whatever, or if you download their firmware update, you would put it in the update folder, and then you would access it. But this will allow you, this utility button will allow you to load and save all of your WAV files and your samples and so forth, and your kits. Like if you have your settings set in a certain way for an entire kit, it'll save all that information for you. You can go in through there. All right, so we're going to exit out. Then we're going to go over here to system. System is exactly what you might imagine it to be. It is your basic brain modifier for the whole thing, for lack of a better term. Your master effect, your click, your audio in and out, your kit chain. I'll explain that in a second. Then you've got your pad or foot switch control. That might be very, very important depending on what you want to do with that. MIDI control, pad setup. And then you've got your LCD screen information. You got your Bluetooth information. And then you have option. So let me go over a couple of key things in this particular menu. So let me go back to kit chain, first of all. Some people don't understand what that is. Kit chain is a performance kind of setting. So what you would do is, let's say kit 1 is one of your favorite kits, but then you need to go to kit 10 for the next song and you're in a live situation, you've got an audience. You don't want to sit there and hit this button like 9 times to get to the next one. So you can preset everything to your set list in advance, so you could just hit one button and it'll go to kit 10. So you could program all of that information in ahead of time, and that would make things a lot easier for you during your performance. Let's go over a couple more things in this particular thing. Bluetooth. If you notice over here on the right-hand side, there's a BT that is Bluetooth, and it works seamlessly. Keep in mind that this is an input Bluetooth, which means when you're running sound from another device, you can Bluetooth that sound into this particular device and mix it with your playing and your tracks and whatever else you're playing on the pads. Like if you were a drummer and you were going to play along with a track, you could play the track on your cell phone or your iPad, and then you could play the drums right here. And then it would all come out the main output or the headphones, wherever you want it to be. You have full optimization of like where you can put that and what volume you wish to do. Option, this is going to be important for you. Okay, so option is where you would go and you would do the firmware update. So in other words, let's say we downloaded the firmware file. It's a bin file. You would put it in the update folder on your FAT32 USB drive. Then you would put that into the back of the machine where the USB port is. And then you would go into option. You would hit OK, which is the same thing as enter. And then it would say reset global or update. You can look down here at your function button. It says update. And then you would hit OK right here to update the file. If you want to see what firmware you're on, you can easily just hit the version button right there, and it shows you all the data of where you are with the software. I think that's very important for you to know. It's one of the first things you're going to get into when you get the device, because there is a firmware update. Even when I ordered this in December, it had the older software running on it at that time, and they had released a firmware update. I believe it was in August of 2024. So already it needed that right away. So I suggest that when you get this machine, because there might be fixes. It seems like that this company, even though I don't know a whole lot about them, it seems like they really care and want to continue with these models and updating them. So I believe there will be more future firmware released in as time goes by. Let's go over these buttons right here. The sample button is probably what you would imagine it to be. This is where you can actually record your sample from any source that has a 1/4 inch input. Now, out the back of this, during the input part of the video that I showed you, you'll see that there is just a regular 1/4 inch input, and you can actually change that 1/4 inch to an 1/8 inch input. It depends on what you want to do, but you can trigger any sound from a keyboard or from a microphone or from another synthesizer or a drum machine, whatever. You can actually run it direct in, and you can change the volume of the input, and you can record it right in here. And then you have some sampling edits that you can do right on board. I find that this is very powerful if you are into that. You will be able to do a lot with it. I don't see any drawbacks about this. Just it's time consuming to mess with samples. That's just how I feel. I guess once you get used to it, it would probably go a little bit faster. I did load a bunch of my samples, but I did it differently, and I'll explain that in a minute. So that's what the sample button is for, and you can see our function buttons here have standby, start, and stop. Very simple. And then you can have auto trigger on, and you can have all these other features going on. Some people know you could probably, we did this earlier where I hit the tempo button and it showed the click. That is what makes the click sound as well into your headphones. I think the way I have it set up right now is that it's only playing through the headphones and not out the back for the line out. In case I would put that through, like, let's say main speakers, I wouldn't want the crowd to hear the click track necessarily. So I think right now that that's off and that it's only through the headphones. The pad Q is kind of an interesting button. It's a really good button if you're trying to listen to something before you actually play it live. So if you're in a live circumstance and you want to trigger a bass guitar loop, let's say you wanted, and it was right here. Let's say you want to make sure that the right tempo or whatever is going on. You want to get the tempo in your head. So you would press the pad Q, hit the loop button, and then you would hit it again to turn it off, and then you can let go. If you have this down, it will cut off the sound to the mains and only allow you to audition the sound through the headphones. So if you want to audition a sound before you send it out to the house, you would press and hold that button. I have not played with this too much, so I don't know how accurate or if there's any kind of weirdness that goes on with it, but I have no reason to believe that it doesn't do exactly what it says it does, for lack of a better term. As I mentioned to you before about the Bluetooth, you have that input option, and that Bluetooth button is right here. You hit that, and it'll sync up with whatever device you have linked up originally. So, and it's just so simple. So when I think I Bluetooth my iPad to this, and literally I went to the Bluetooth in the iPad. I hit this little button. It showed up as sampler pad. I clicked on it, and it connected flawlessly. So it works really super well. There's no weirdness going on, at least not with my setup. And I've had weirdness happen with Bluetooth connections. There's always some weirdness. Now I'm going to dig a little bit into the weeds here. So if you're not a drummer, or if you don't want these kind of details, then you may want to fast forward to the review section, because I would like to give you some hints that will make your performance on the pads even better, especially if you're a drummer. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go into the home button. I'm going to go to this particular setup right here is for a drum set that I created. So I used my own samples and I put them in here and I designed it my own way. When you buy the machine here, when you buy the PD708, it comes with 30 kits already pre-programmed. And it's kind of like your demonstration kits, right? They want you to be able to take a look at or take a listen and try things out and learn about that. That is one really, really great way for you to understand how the menus should be and what the settings should be possibly when you get into the weeds of this. I'm going to show you a few little tricks that I've done that I think that are very valuable little tricks, especially again, if you're a drummer. All right. So, like I said, this whole entire pad setup is for a drummer. And here's why I would say that. I'm going to go into the pad and I'm going to show you a little bit more in detail about the samples that I've chosen. Like, let's start right here. There is my snare drum. I put my snare drum here all the time. I don't want to ever be confused and move it to any other pad. It's always going to be there for me. So that is, first of all, you got to be really, really careful about that because you don't want to get confused, between things. As far as I know, I can't change the color of each of the pads. Maybe you can, and I haven't discovered it yet, but at this point, I don't know that you can change the colors of each pad. I think all the LEDs for each kit is one color, as far as I know. If you find out anything different, let me know. So we have sample one. We talked about that briefly, and then we have sample two. Here's one of those advanced little techniques. In sample one, I just have a regular snare drum sound that I like a lot. But in sample two, or wave B, they call it wave, and that's fine. Wave B, sample two, whatever, that layered sound, that is a rim shot sound. So if you're playing it, the way I have it set up, I have it set up in a way that if you play it soft, it just triggers the snare drum. But if you play it a little bit louder, it blends in or mixes in the rim shot sound. So it gives it more of an attack sound on top. And you can see where it says fade, that's the idea, or mix would be the same way. So for example, if every time I hit it, the sample A or wave A would play every single time, but the second one would not play very loud, but if I play the pad louder, it would play it louder as well. It would mix into that sound output. Okay, you can adjust all of that. You can adjust the sensitivity. You can adjust, the panning, the volume, all of that stuff. You can dig into it that deep. But I wanted you to understand that little bit. There's one other little trick that I've done that I think works really, really well. Sorry about that. I wanted to go back to here, this screen here, and what I've done is I put 3 tom-toms here, a high, medium, and a low. And what I did was when I created the samples, I only created one sample per pad. So I created one high tom, one middle, and one low tom. So what I did though is I created copies of the same exact sounds, but I added a little bit more of attack frequencies in the EQ. So in other words, I added a little bit of a higher end, a high end, and a little bit of a little mids to give it a little bit more of a crack sound when you hit the tom-tom. So it gives it a little bit more thud with more of a sharper attack. I shouldn't say thud. It really is more of a sharp attack. So the louder you hit the pad, the way I have it set up right now, is the louder and the more attack you get. That's exactly how a drum really plays. If you play it soft, you get more of a dull sound. If you play it harder, it gets to be a little bit more of an attack sound. So that's one way that you can really get really great mileage out of this. That's a nice customizable feature that you can do with this unit, and I've done so and I just love it. I love that I can get like a very authentic sound. But let me show you something else that you need to understand about this. You have different modes in here. So I'm going to go back to my snare drum, but check this out. You have different modes in here, and I think I went over this earlier, but just in case I wasn't clear, this is you can change it to where you play it and you'll only get the first wave or the wave A. Here you can get it for sample A or sample B or wave B. And then here you can have both at the same time. Here you can have where it switches from one to the other depending on your velocity that you hit it. So if you hit it soft, you get one. If you hit it loud, you get the other sound. If round robin is just exactly what you would imagine. It plays one sound, then it plays the next sound, even though you're hitting the same pad. It just changes from one wave or one sample to the other. Mix, it blends it in, and so same with fade, and that's a little bit more in depth. We can go over that another time. All right, so this should cover all of those little advanced techniques that I've kind of learned about as far as setting this up as a drum kit. That's its main purpose for me, but I can see this being used for a lot of different purposes. And now it's time to get into the review. All right, is this right for you? Well, honestly, you know the answer to that, and that is you're the only one that can make that decision. I will tell you from my point of view that this is a really great bargain. It was only around $300 in December of 2024 when I purchased this. I feel that that's a really great price because a lot of these instruments are $600 and up. I've seen them as expensive as $1,200. I'm sure there's something beyond that. I feel that this really does everything I need it to do. It's going to play samples. I can use this as a drum set. I can also use this as a looping feature. I can use this in a lot of different ways for a lot of different settings that I'm in. Now, the drawback to this is going to be the software. The software component to this, to me, is a drawback. And here's why. I have a Mac and it's got the silicon chip, and I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not. So it's possible that the software that they create for this device just isn't compatible with that type of Mac. It's possible. I don't know the answer to that. But I do know that it does not talk well. In other words, if other manufacturers make the software so you can create an entire kit, upload your samples and everything on your desktop, and then you could USB right into the unit itself, and you can just hit a button and it'll load instantly. For me to get the samples on here, I had to trial and error, just try several different things on the laptop, and then I had to put it on a thumb drive and put it into, I had to format the thumb drive to I call it a thumb drive. Does anybody call it a thumb drive anymore? Anyway, USB drive. I had to format it to FAT32, which is kind of common for instruments. And then you can put it into the back, but you also have to create a directory that makes sense, that it can read. And that means you have to have one folder that says, what does it say? Update, one that says load, and one that says save. It's the only way this will read it is the way I found out. I mean, like when I just put the files on the thumb drive on the root directory, it didn't find it. But if I put it under a file called load, and if I put it in a folder called load, it would actually find it. So I don't know what that's all about. I don't know if it was just my setup or if this is something across the board. But I have a feeling that this company is going to invest more time and money into this device and make sure. So my gut instinct tells me that at some point in the near future, they're going to update their firmware to make it so you can make the changes on your software and just send it over automatically via the USB that's in the back here and not need a USB drive. Obviously, having a USB drive can help you in a lot of other ways. Like you could save everything onto the USB drive, and then you can, reconfigure things. And if you don't like how you've reconfigured it, you can always reload it back onto it. So it's good backup. There are some other advantages to having that other USB drive for this device, but I would love for it to just talk seamlessly, and that's not what it does. So that's the big drawback. Keep in mind that there is a manual online for the software. You can only access the manual through the software too. So you can't like read it earlier. You have to go and load the software first. As a matter of fact, I had a hard time actually loading the software onto the Mac, and that could be because of the latest, the chip, the silicon chip. It could be because of the new operating system under Mac. I don't have the answers for that. All I know is it took a lot of finagling for me to get it to work. Finagling, does anybody use that term? Whatever. Anyway, so I know it took a little bit of work for me to get that to work. With that being said, overall, if you said, hey, would you buy this again? I would say absolutely. I think it's a really, really great device. I think it can do a lot for you. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe. Please like the video. That sends it out there. I know you've heard this before. If you're still watching me at this point, you've heard it all before. It really, really helps more people get this information. And there are not that many reviews on this particular instrument out there, to be honest with you. So this could use a little bit of help getting the news out there of how good this really is, and the drawbacks and the positives, the highlights about this, and make sure that people know before they order it, because you're ordering it from Amazon kind of blind. You're not going to go into a local music store and find this anywhere. At least I haven't. If you do find that, please let me know. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. If you would like to see a more in-depth review about this instrument, about exactly how to do certain things, please let me know in the comments. I would be glad to do a more informative video for you anytime, but just let me know that you need it and I'll get it done. Thank you so much.